Is home ownership and housing policy being weaponized to change the political landscape without dragging up the World Economic Forum and owning nothing and being happy? But without home ownership as we know it, will this shift political views? I was chatting to a couple in the US just last week, and they were reaching about 40 years of age, well paid, but they have given up the idea of home ownership and are satisfied with just renting for the foreseeable future. And it also came up quite evident in some of the comments of a YouTube live I did, where there was a lot of despair, particularly with younger people, in terms of home ownership and just the reality that it may be out of reach forever. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Fleming. I create these videos because I enjoy talking about real estate and economics, and I would love to know what you think about these topics in the comments below. Also subscribe and like this video. Your support does help drive me on to create more and more videos, so show that support. Home ownership isn't just about holding an asset. It forms part of people's identity. It forms part of self-worth. It's belonging to a community. It's belonging to a neighborhood. It's that willingness to improve an area, to settle, to put down roots, and to help a community grow and improve. Simple things like keeping the garden looking good, painting the house, signing up to coach the local sports team, helping with the community, raise funds, tidy town, etc. All of these things are kind of like part and parcel once you own. As a renter, you're less likely to be tied down and you're less likely to do these things. I'm not saying that's wrong or you won't do these things. I'm just saying you're less likely to. If you buy somewhere, your outlook or your willingness to invest energy into that community grows. But what happens to society if home ownership starts to shift? As young people get locked out of home ownership, it doesn't just change their financial status, it changes society in terms of its makeup from a community point of view and from a nation's point of view. It changes fundamental beliefs within the society. For decades, buying your first home was a stepping stone into adulthood for many. But today, many 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and sometimes 40-year-olds are either renting or living with their parents more than ever before. Ireland's home ownership has dropped from 79% in 1991 to about 66% in 2022, and that percentage has probably dropped even further because non-owners' percentage is growing rapidly. 41% of 18 to 35-year-olds now live with their parents, and that was the census back in 2022. It's more like probably 50% now. And it's the same story across the UK, Europe, and the US. The pattern is clear. Young people aren't buying homes at the same rate that their parents did, and many young adults are being forced to live with their parents. First-time buyers are now reaching the average age of around 40 before they actually buy. And that is having long-term cultural and political consequences. Housing affordability has collapsed, wages have stalled, supply is so low. New construction for new homes that people can actually buy is way below target, and taxes and regulations have forced many landlords to leave the market, causing even greater issues on the rental side. So while buying actually might seem like a really good option and what people want to do, there's nowhere really to buy. So many people who are actually able to buy and people who aren't able to buy are just locked out. They can't see a path to ownership. And when you stop believing that the system is actually working for you and that path to ownership is blocked or potentially impossible, your political views start to shift as well. And this needs to be a potential wake-up call for the established governments in Ireland, the UK, Europe, and the US. And the older population also need to wake up to this as well, because the country they know might shift very dramatically, very quickly. People generally become more conservative when they buy a house and they have kids. It's not always the case, but it's generally the case. People do start to think more conservatively when they set down some roots and they want to protect their neighborhood and their area. But if buying a home is out of reach for many people and starting a family is being put off for longer and longer, that center balance that we have starts to shift, and it could go either far left or far right. But that shift is away from the center, and that shift is more likely to happen the less people have that sense of ownership within owning a home. And research across many different countries show that when housing affordability declines, support for government intervention rises, which is pretty obvious. In the US and Europe, young people and young adults are being locked out of the market, which we know. And they're starting to increasingly favour strong social welfare and even nationalise some companies and some industries. In Ireland, we've seen a push for very strong social housing, even talks of housing referendum, which would actually remove the right for private property ownership from the Irish Constitution. And this is the perfect or the classic example of making things so bad that the only solution is to give up more personal rights. In the US, it's likely that the next New York mayor will be an extreme socialist. Reports or studies out of the Czech Republic and the UK show that when affordable pressures are exerted on the population, it correlates with support of intervention, which is obvious. But it's not always like full-blown communism, but it is a way or an element to control capitalism. And perhaps that over-management of capitalism that we've seen has led us to this point and has led us to this turning point in the first place. People will be quick to state that capitalism has failed the housing market, or housing doesn't respond to supply and demand. But capitalism has failed and has failures, particularly around the reduction of corporation tax over the last few decades, that has created such a wealth divide that has never been seen before. But it hasn't failed the housing market, and it does apply to supply and demand. It's the over-regulations within the housing market that has failed the capitalist system. And the evidence is quite clear on this. When you have planning authorities and governments that are more liberal and actually stay out of the way of the market and allow for more development, supply is greater and prices are more affordable. But when governments over-regulate, we end up where we are in the situation that we now face. And with more than 60% of people between 18 and 29 having favourable views on socialism, what does that mean for the future of home ownership in multiple different countries? If you are a young person, it's not that you suddenly love socialism or communism, it's that you feel it's the only thing that you have an option for, or you have to settle for it. You have to settle for state housing, as it's the best option in terms of socialism or the state providing housing, because it's better than the worst alternative, i.e. still living with your parents. But this is not what young people would really choose if they had a real opportunity. They wouldn't choose state housing or more social housing. They'd choose a better solution, one that actually creates wealth for them. In Ireland, many 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds and sometimes 40-year-olds are still living at home with their parents. This is not out of choice. The data is the same in the US and the UK and across Europe. And the same frustrations are being felt by these young people because they've given up on the idea of buying altogether. And instead of investing in the idea of buying a home or buying a home, they're starting to invest in ideology. Because when you can't own your own home or own something, and you feel that the system is not working for you, you actually start to think about how to own the system instead. And there are some stats or recent articles around this where young voters are thinking more along the lines of owning the political system rather than actually owning a stake in the economy. 62% of Americans aged 18 to 29 have a favourable view of socialism. 53% of young UK people from 18 to 35 support socialism and the idea of it replacing the economic system. This isn't about ideology for ideology's sake. It's not because the World Economic Forum has great marketing efforts about owning nothing and being happy. It's about frustrations with the system that's not delivering at the moment. When people stop being able to own assets, they start demanding more control. We don't fix this through ideology. We fix it through supply and more opportunities that a good capitalist system can provide when we give it proper guide rails. We need to restore the links between working hard, ownership and wealth. And without this, the next generation won't just change their mind on housing, they'll change their mind on the whole economic system itself. And I, for one, don't want to see us go far right or far left, because that's what will happen if we fail the next generation on housing, because housing shapes everything. It shapes savings, wealth, family, and even policy. Governments and society really need to think about how they give the next generation a sense of ownership. If they cannot provide housing, it needs to be ownership in wealth creation, an easier way, a more tax efficient way to invest in real world assets. And this needs to be done in a meaningful way so people can build long-term family wealth. If not, the next generation locked out of home ownership will look for a political pound of flesh, which will come with some extreme ideology. And history has told us that this is not a good path to go down.